Welcome to ZoomInData, your go-to channel for in-depth Azure Cloud, Serverless, and modern development interview preparation. In this video, we dive deep into the top 25 Azure Functions Cosmos DB triggers interview questions for 2026. Perfect for developers, architects, and anyone preparing for AZ-204 certification or building reactive, change feed-driven serverless applications with Azure Cosmos DB. We cover change feed fundamentals, leases, checkpointing, partition handling, batch processing, scaling, debugging, security, monitoring, testing, schema evolution, and best practices, all explained in clear, interview-ready technical language to help you confidently ace your next interview. 1. What is a Cosmos DB trigger in Azure Functions? A Cosmos DB trigger is an event-driven trigger that automatically invokes a function whenever documents are inserted or updated in a monitored Azure Cosmos DB container via the change feed. It enables reactive, real-time processing of database changes for use cases such as data synchronization, auditing, ETL pipelines, or materialized view maintenance. Built on the Cosmos DB change feed processor, it provides ordered, at least once delivery of changes across all partitions. Ideal for event-driven architectures where downstream actions must respond immediately to database modifications. 2. How does Cosmos DB trigger use change feed? Cosmos DB trigger listens to the change feed, which is a persistent, ordered log of all inserts and updates in the container. Change feed provides time-ordered events per logical partition key, ensuring reliable delivery without polling the entire container. Trigger reads changes in batches and invokes the function for each batch of modified documents. Supports both full change feed, all versions, and latest version only modes depending on configuration. 3. Explain leases collection and checkpointing. Leases collection is a separate container that stores checkpoint information, continuation tokens, and ownership or lease state for each partition. Checkpointing records the last successfully processed change feed continuation token per partition, ensuring exactly one semantics during normal operation. Lease management assigns partition ownership to a single function instance at a time, preventing duplicate processing across scaled instances. Leases are renewed periodically. Lease loss triggers rebalancing and potential reprocessing from last checkpoint. 4. How do you configure Cosmos DB connection? Connection configured via app setting, for example Cosmos DB connection, containing the Cosmos DB connection string or managed identity. Supports account endpoint plus key, managed identity, or resource connection string for secure, keyless access. Multiple Cosmos DB accounts possible with named connections, for example My Cosmos connection. Key vault references supported for secure storage of connection strings. 5. What is the role of monitored container and leases container? Monitored container is the Cosmos DB container whose changes, inserts and updates trigger the function via change feed. Leases container, separate container, stores checkpoint tokens, partition ownership, and lease state for reliable processing. Leases container must exist and have proper permissions before function startup. Recommended. Dedicated leases container per function app to avoid contention. 6. How do you handle partition processing in Cosmos DB trigger? Cosmos DB trigger automatically distributes logical partitions across scaled function instances for parallel processing. Each instance owns one or more partitions via lease mechanism, ownership rebalanced on scale events or failures. Processing order guaranteed per logical partition, changes arrive in order within partition. Partition key selection in container design affects distribution and scalability. 7. Explain batch size and feed poll delay. Batch size, max batch size, default 100, controls how many changes are processed per function invocation. Feed poll delay, default 5000 milliseconds, sets interval between change feed checks when no new changes exist. Larger batch size improves throughput but increases memory usage and latency on failure. Shorter poll delay reduces latency but increases root consumption, tune based on change frequency. 8. What is the start from beginning option? Start from beginning equals true processes all historical changes in the container from the beginning of time. Useful for initial catch-up or rebuilding downstream views after new subscription. Default is false, starts from current point in change feed, can cause high root consumption and long processing time for large historical datasets. 9. How do you handle deletes and updates in change feed? Change feed captures inserts and updates but does not include deletes by default. Soft delete pattern recommended. Use soft deletes, set_deleted equals true, to capture delete intent in change feed. Updates trigger change feed with full document, latest version, previous versions not included. Handle deletes and updates in function code by checking document properties or metadata. 10. Explain change feed processor library. Change feed processor is the underlying library used by Cosmos DB trigger for reliable, distributed processing. Manages leases, checkpointing, partition distribution, and error handling automatically. Supports custom processor implementations for advanced scenarios. Trigger uses built-in processor. Custom processor offers more control over batching and error handling. 11. How do you scale Cosmos DB trigger? Cosmos DB trigger scales out based on number of logical partitions and change volume. Multiple instances process different partitions in parallel. Scale controller adds instances as backlog grows. Scale in when change rate decreases. Premium plan pre-warmed instances reduce scaling latency. Throughput, root per second, of monitored container limits overall processing rate. 12. What is the difference between Cosmos DB trigger and input binding? Trigger invokes function on every change. Input binding reads current document snapshot on demand. Trigger processes changes in order with at least once delivery. Input binding is point-in-time read. Trigger suitable for reactive processing. Input binding for on-demand lookups. Trigger uses change feed. Input binding uses point read or query. 13. How do you handle large documents? Cosmos DB documents limited to 2 megabytes. Large documents process normally but consume more root per second and memory. Stream large documents using appropriate serialization. Avoid loading unnecessary fields. Use reference pattern for very large data. Store in blob. Reference in document. Batch size tuning helps manage memory for large document batches. 14. Explain Cosmos DB trigger in premium plan. Premium plan maintains pre-warmed instances, eliminating cold start latency for change feed processing. Supports unbounded execution duration and higher memory allocation for complex change handling. Virtual network integration and private endpoints available for secure Cosmos DB access. Better suited for latency sensitive or high change volume workloads. 15. How do you debug Cosmos DB triggers locally? Use Cosmos DB emulator for local change feed simulation during development. Insert or update documents in emulator container. Trigger fires locally on changes. Func start runs trigger on change detection. Breakpoints hit in debugger. Logstream captures change feed events and processing flow in real time. 16. What happens if lease is lost? Lease loss, for example instance failure, triggers rebalancing. Another instance acquires partition lease. Processing resumes from last successful checkpoint, potentially causing duplicate processing. Implement ID impotency in function code to handle possible duplicates safely. Lease renewal failure logged. Monitor for frequent lease churn. 17. How do you configure change feed for specific partitions? Change feed processes all partitions by default. No built-in partition filtering in Trigger. Use partition key range filtering in custom change feed processor. Advanced scenario. Filter changes inside function code by checking document partition key. Multiple function apps with different leases containers for partition isolation. 18. Explain retry behavior for change feed. Cosmos DB trigger does not have built-in retry. Failures cause checkpoint not to advance. Next batch reprocesses from last successful checkpoint on subsequent invocation. Implement custom retry logic inside function for transient failures. Use poison message pattern to move failed changes after maximum attempts. 19. How do you monitor change feed lag? Azure Monitor metrics provide change feed lag, time between change and processing. Application Insights tracks function invocation latency and backlog indirectly. Cosmos DB metrics show pending changes and root consumption for feed processing. Set alerts on high lag or processing delay for proactive scaling. 20. What is the role of continuation token? Continuation token represents the position in change feed where processing last succeeded. Stored in leases collection per partition for reliable resume after restarts. Used by change feed processor to resume from last checkpoint. Prevents reprocessing of already handled changes. 21. How do you handle schema changes in documents? Change feed delivers full latest document version. Schema changes reflected in new events. Use flexible deserialization, dynamic objects or JSON document to handle evolving schemas. Implement version field or metadata to detect schema version in function code. Validate and migrate documents if downstream systems require specific schema. 22. Explain Cosmos DB trigger in isolated worker model. Isolated worker model fully supports Cosmos DB triggers with identical configuration and behavior. Worker process handles change feed processing independently for better isolation. Improved dependency management and flexibility with .NET 8 and above. Configuration via host, JSON and app settings remains consistent. 23. How do you secure Cosmos DB connections? Prefer managed identities or SAS tokens instead of connection strings for secure access. Use private endpoints to secure Cosmos DB account within virtual network. Restrict Cosmos DB firewall to allow only function app outbound traffic. Assign least privilege roles. Cosmos DB built-in data reader to identity. 24. How do you test Cosmos DB triggers? Use Cosmos DB emulator for local change feed simulation during development. Insert or update documents in emulator container. Trigger fires locally on changes. Func start runs trigger on change detection. Debug with breakpoints. Integration tests validate checkpointing, lease handling, and duplicate processing. 25. Best practices for Cosmos DB trigger usage. Use dedicated leases container per function app to avoid contention and improve isolation. Implement ID impotency and handle duplicates for reliable processing in distributed environments. Tune batch size and poll delay for balance between latency and root consumption. Monitor change feed lag, processing latency, and failures. Set alerts on anomalies. Thank you for watching. If this video helped you prepare for your Azure Functions interview, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your network. Do not forget to subscribe to ZoomInData and hit the bell icon for more in-depth cloud computing, serverless, and Azure interview prep videos every week. Drop your questions or topic requests in the comments. Let us zoom in on your success together.